The game of darts has seen its fair share of drama, gritty rivalries, legendary comebacks, and unforgettable upsets.
Any dart player would have done, apart from Justin Pipe. I've got a cough, I've got a cough, I turn away. I guarantee I turn away. He made no effort to do so. That was a tactic for advantage, that was a tactic to make Bernie Smith miss. He got his way. Whether Bernie Smith heard it or not is absolutely irrelevant. The intent was there. The DRA have to do something.
But what if some of those moments weren't entirely organic? What if the rules of the game weren't just changing for fairness or evolution, but to serve hidden agendas? At first glance, darts seems like one of the purest forms of competition. A player, a board, free darts, and nothing but skill standing between glory and failure. No refs making bad calls, just precision, nerve, and consistency. But over the years, that purity has been tampered with, not by players, but by the very people running the sport. If you think darts is immune to behind-the-scenes manipulation, by the end of this video, you might not be so sure. Some of these changes were framed as progress, but when you look closer, the motivations get murkier. These are the most corrupt rule changes in darts history. It was a rule change so subtle, so seemingly harmless, that most casual fans barely noticed. But for the players at the top of the game, the ones who lived and breathed every dart thrown, it was a shift that carried consequences far beyond what was advertised. Officially, it was framed as a necessary evolution, a way to modernize the sport and bring it in line with contemporary competition standards. In reality, it was a calculated maneuver that quietly reshaped the power dynamics of professional darts, favoring some while sidelining others. For years, the Grand Slam of darts had been a rare bridge between rival worlds, the PDC's elite and the scrappier, old-school BDO players who had fought to keep their circuit alive. It was a tournament unlike any other, a clash of styles, mindsets, and, sometimes, entire ideologies of how darts should be played. More importantly, it was the last remaining stage where BDO players could prove, in real time, that they could go toe-to-toe with the sport's biggest names. And occasionally, they did. But in the year 2019, that window was slammed shut. The PDC introduced a new qualification system that conveniently erased automatic spots for BDO champions, replacing them with a selection process that, unsurprisingly, leaned heavily toward PDC's own players. The justification, a vague insistence that the tournament needed a stronger field, a phrase that, when translated from corporate spin, essentially meant, "We don't want the BDO here anymore." Of course, for the casual fan, this might not have seemed like a big deal. If the PDC had the best players, wouldn't a stronger field just mean better matches? But this is where the true impact of the rule change started to reveal itself. The Grand Slam wasn't just about competition, it was about opportunity. The BDO was already on life support, struggling with lower prize pools, dwindling sponsorships, and a growing exodus of talent defecting to the PDC for better paydays. The Grand Slam was one of the last platforms keeping the BDO remotely relevant. By cutting them out, the PDC wasn't just strengthening its own ranks, it was tightening its grip on the entire professional darts ecosystem. Some saw it as an inevitable shift. The BDO had been in decline for years, and the PDC was simply accelerating a process that was bound to happen anyway.
BDO players in it now? No. I think that is one of the most stupid decisions the PDC made to involve BDO players when it affects PDC rankings. You know, it was crazy. You know?
But others, especially those who had spent their careers in the BDO system, saw it for what it was. A final nail in the coffin, a manufactured extinction event disguised as a merit-based improvement. And when the BDO finally collapsed for good not long after, there was no Grand Slam invitation to offer a lifeline. The door had been locked. The sport was now, officially, a one-party system. Perhaps the cruelest irony of it all, the very players who had once given the Grand Slam its magic, the underdogs who had walked into PDC territory and taken down giants, would never be allowed back. The same organisation that had built its reputation on being the fairer, more professional alternative to the BDO had, in the end, used one of the oldest tricks in the book. Change the rules, tilt the playing field, and watch as the competition disappears. For decades, the double-in, double-out format was a proving ground for true precision. It was darts at its most unforgiving. No easy starts, no free passes, just pure accuracy under pressure.
Greatest recipe for heartbreak in this discipline.
And for one tournament, the World Grand Prix, it was the ultimate separator between the great and the nearly great. Until, of course, the sport's decision makers decided it was too difficult for modern audiences. The double-in format wasn't just a rule, it was a psychological test. Players who thrived on rhythm hated it. A slow start could spiral into disaster, and even the best could look amateurish when their darts refused to land in that opening double. But that was the beauty of it. It exposed weaknesses, forced adaptability, and made every leg a battle. Yet over time, it became clear that the PDC wasn't fond of unpredictability. The double-in format quietly faded from other events, leaving the World Grand Prix as its last stand. Why? Because a format that increases variance doesn't guarantee the dream matchup sponsors crave. Nobody in a suit wants their poster boy knocked out in round 1 because he couldn't hit a double. So while the World Grand Prix still clings to its unique identity, for now, one thing is clear. Darts is moving toward a version of the game where risk is minimized and predictability is king. Selection for the Premier League of Darts was always meant to be about merit, an exclusive battleground for the best in the world, where only the elite got their shot. That was the illusion anyway. In reality, the selection process has never been purely about skill. Over the years, wildcards have been handed out with all the subtlety of a backroom deal, rewarding marketability over rankings and ensuring that certain players, whether through name value or commercial appeal, always had a seat at the table. It didn't start out this way. Originally, qualification was clear-cut, major winners, top-ranked players and the most dominant forces in the sport. But as darts' global appeal grew, so did the temptation to curate the lineup. Wildcards became a tool for guaranteeing big-name clashes, even if that meant overlooking a player who had grinded their way up the rankings in favour of one who looked better on a billboard. For sponsors, this made perfect sense. Star power sells. A legendary name, even one past their prime, still draws more casual viewers than an in-form but relatively unknown pro. But for the players, it became obvious that making the Premier League wasn't just about throwing the best darts. It was about whether the suits in charge thought you were good for business. The result? A tournament where credibility and entertainment are constantly at war, and more often than not, entertainment wins. Slow play has always been a grey area in darts. Unlike sports with a shot clock or a strict time limit, the game relies on rhythm, routine, and, depending on the player, occasional mind games. Some players fire their darts like a machine gun, barely giving themselves time to think. Others take a more methodical approach, staring down their target as if they're trying to will the dart into place. Neither approach is illegal, at least not until the rules start getting enforced selectively. Over the years, there have been moments when the PDC suddenly decided that slow play was an issue. Except it never seemed to be an issue for everyone. Certain players, often those with more fluid, rapid styles, never had to worry about being penalised. But those who played at a deliberate pace, they found themselves under the microscope. Warnings, fines, the occasional outright public shaming. The most infamous case came when Justin Pipe was accused of deliberately slowing down his game to disrupt an opponent's rhythm at the World Championship. The backlash was swift, and Pipe was vilified for what many saw as blatant gamesmanship. But here's the catch. Players had been using similar tactics for years without consequence. It wasn't that slow play had suddenly become unacceptable. It was that the rules were being enforced only when it suited the narrative. The message was clear. Play your game however you want, unless it messes with the wrong person. Seeding in darts is supposed to reflect skill. If you're one of the best, you should get rewarded for it. Simple enough. But over the years, the way players are ranked and positioned in major tournaments has felt less like an objective system and more like a well-placed nudge in the right direction for the right people. The match play seeding adjustments are a perfect example. Traditionally, the format ensured that the best players avoided each other early, making deep runs more likely and guaranteeing top-tier matchups in the later stages. On paper, this sounds fair. But when the seeding criteria started shifting, tweaking ranking points, emphasizing recent results over long-term consistency, some players suddenly found themselves with a suspiciously convenient path to the final, while others, despite stellar form, were thrown into early round bloodbaths. The real issue isn't just the changes themselves, it's when they happen. Subtle tweaks to rankings and point allocations have a habit of appearing just in time to shake up the bracket in favour of bigger names. It's the kind of thing that can be justified on a spreadsheet, but doesn't quite pass the smell test. In a game where one break of throw can decide a career-changing match, these adjustments matter. And while the official line will always be about fairness and evolution, the reality is far simpler. Predictable matchups mean bigger storylines, bigger sponsors, and fewer unwanted surprises. Prize money in darts is supposed to be simple: win more, earn more. But over time, the way payouts have been distributed has quietly shifted, and not in a way that benefits the entire player pool. The biggest tournaments have seen their total prize funds increase, yet somehow, the gap between the top and the rest of the field has only widened. Take the World Championship, for example. The winner's payout has skyrocketed over the years, hitting eye-watering sums that make headlines and sell the dream of life-changing riches. But further down the payout structure, not quite as generous. Players who grind through early rounds or even make deep runs without winning often find themselves barely breaking even after travel, accommodation, and expenses. The same trend has been creeping into other majors, with a growing chunk of the money funneling toward the biggest names while the lower tiers of professional darts struggle to stay afloat. This isn't an accident. It keeps the focus on a handful of marketable stars, ensures the biggest names stay financially comfortable, and, more importantly, discourages too much unpredictability. The more desperate a lower-ranked player is to survive, the more likely they are to crack under pressure. And in a sport where upsets make great stories but consistent names bring in sponsors, it's clear which one the system is designed to protect. Some rule changes happen in a boardroom. Others happen mid-tournament, when the stakes are already sky-high, and the only people caught off guard are the ones who have to play by them. Darts has had its fair share of sudden, unexplained tweaks, and if there's one thing that should make any player nervous, it's when the rulebook starts evolving in real time. Take the countback rule fiasco, a seemingly harmless statistical tiebreaker that became a landmine for certain players. For years, deciding group stage ties at events like the Grand Slam was straightforward: leg difference, head-to-head record, and if all else failed, a 9-dart shootout. But in some cases, just when players thought they knew what to expect, a new rule quietly appeared: countback, which prioritized performances against specific opponents rather than overall results. Suddenly, 2 players could finish with identical records, but only one would go through based on criteria that hadn't even been discussed before the event started. And then there are the timing rule enforcements: selective, inconsistent, and somehow always arriving at the worst possible moment. Some players have gone entire tournaments without a warning for slow play, while others have been hit with penalties for taking a few extra seconds in a deciding leg. In most sports, rule changes are debated, tested, and implemented over time. In darts, sometimes you find out after you've already lost. Darts has always had a rowdy charm: blaring walk-on music, beer-fueled crowds, and players who knew how to play up to the spectacle. It wasn't just about the game, it was about the atmosphere. But as the sport grew, so did the push to clean it up. Enter the ban on walk-on girls, a rule change that split fans, divided players, and revealed the PDC's shifting priorities. For years, walk-on girls were a staple of darts, accompanying players to the stage while the crowd roared. It was showbiz, pure and simple. Then, in 2018, the PDC abruptly scrapped them, citing the need to modernize the sport and promote inclusivity. On paper, it sounded progressive. In practice, it looked like a PR move designed to appease corporate sponsors more concerned with image than tradition. Players weren't consulted. Many outright disagreed. The walk-on girls themselves spoke out, pointing out the obvious flaw in the decision.
Well, obviously it was quite disappointing. Obviously I've been part of the darts now for over 3 years, and it's been a fantastic position to have. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time as a walk-on girl, and I was obviously quite disappointed when I got the message that I wasn't going to be doing it anymore.
A lot of people have been getting in touch saying that people are being outraged on your behalf. If you have no problem with doing that job, you're not being put in harm's way, what's it got to do with anyone else?
Well, exactly. I mean, in my opinion, you know, there's attractive women on TV in every aspect, presenters, models, etc. And, you know, if we're happy to do that job, then what does it matter?
They weren't being exploited, they were being employed. Fans, especially those who had embraced darts' unapologetic entertainment factor, felt like something was being sanitized out of existence. The PDC claimed they wanted to make darts more family-friendly, yet betting sponsorships remained front and center. It wasn't about morality, it was about optics. And once again, a decision about the sport wasn't made for the people who play it or the people who watch it. It was made for the ones who fund it. For a sport that was born in pubs and fueled by pints, the ban on drinking on stage was a seismic shift, not just in practice, but in identity. Once upon a time, Players would stroll onto the oche with a pint in one hand and a cigarette in the other, casually knocking back a few drinks between throws. It wasn't just accepted, it was part of the culture, and then, seemingly overnight, it wasn't. The PDC's decision to ban alcohol consumption during matches wasn't entirely shocking. By the early 2000s, darts was transitioning from a working-class pastime to a polished, sponsor-friendly product. Broadcasters wanted a sport that looked professional, and drunken, glassy-eyed players missing doubles for fun weren't exactly ideal for branding deals. But while the move was framed as an effort to improve performance and elevate the game's reputation, it was hard to ignore the bigger picture. The PDC didn't mind rowdy fans drinking by the gallon. They didn't mind betting logos plastered across the stage. They didn't even mind players drinking off camera, as long as it wasn't caught by the broadcasters. The issue wasn't alcohol. It was the image of alcohol. And so, a piece of darts history was quietly erased. Not because it made the sport better, but because it made it easier to sell. For years, professional darts was simple. If you were good enough, you could play. No politics, no backdoor deals, just raw ability. Then came the PDC tour card system, and suddenly, talent wasn't enough. Now, you needed money. The tour card was pitched as a way to professionalize the sport, ensuring only serious players competed at the highest level. In reality, it functioned more like an expensive membership fee. Players had to navigate Q School, a brutal qualifying event that cost a small fortune in entry fees, travel, and accommodation. Fail, you were locked out of every major tournament, no underdog stories. The irony? The PDC built its brand on being the open, meritocratic alternative to the BDO. But with this system, they created an even more exclusive club. Fans were told they were watching the best of the best. In reality, they were watching the best of those who could afford to be there. Darts has changed. Some of it was natural evolution, but a lot of it, carefully engineered to benefit the right people. From pay-to-play barriers to conveniently timed rule adjustments, the sport's governing bodies have quietly shaped the game into something more predictable, more marketable, and, some would argue, less fair. But if you think rule changes were the only way the game's integrity has been compromised, you'll want to see what happens when players themselves start bending the rules. From blatant match fixing to sneaky on-stage antics, darts has had its fair share of cheaters. Some got away with it, and others, not so much. Click here to watch the biggest cheating scandals in darts history.